Hi, I'm Cheryl Statz, and I'd like to introduce Senate President Peter Courtney, incumbent Democrat candidate for Senate District 11. Tell us what you did for senior and people with disabilities during your time in office.
Well, I've been in office for a while, Cheryl, so let me just start with a philosophy. I am a senior. I'm 75, so I may be a senior in this room with all the cameras and everybody's here. So I guess it's an attitude I've always had that seniors have basically, they are the ones that have raised the generations. They are the ones that have worked hard all their lives. They are the ones that have helped bring the community to where it is today. And they deserve dignity and respect, whether it's keeping them in their homes, being able to live with relatives, or in a retirement center, whether it's being able to move about freely, anything and everything. I've tried to support programs that deal with their life and their quality of life so that they can feel that they've got dignity and respect. So it's an attitudinal thing, and I think whether it's budget or policy issues, I've been in the forefront.
Thank you. Tell us at least 3 of your positions that would encourage a senior or person with disabilities to re-elect you.
Last session in February, we worked hard to pass a bill to reform our transit system so we could have better bus service, in part to help seniors get around. We continue to make sure we protect project independence, but there's also issues about seniors who want to be able to live in certain places now that they struggle with relatives, friends, whatever. So that is something I think we need a whole lot more work to do. I also think that I want to make sure in health care they don't have to be in long lines. They don't have to do a lot of paperwork. I've seen that. I've experienced it myself. And so all those little things can make all the difference in the world in a senior's life. And that is something I try to remind myself of every time when I'm dealing with senior issues in the Oregon legislature.
Thank you. Oregon Project Independence is a program that's kept seniors and people with disabilities in their own home, and yet every year proposed funding for OPI is significantly cut. What did you do to protect current funding for OPI, and if re-elected, how will you ensure continued funding for this cost-effective program?
When you say cut, I don't know. We haven't every year done the increasing, so perhaps that's why you're saying cut. And I'd like to think if we can get the funding through K through 12 I want, permanent funding, then the general fund, money in general, will allow us to move in many bold directions. And one of them is in Project Independence. There is not enough money in it. I totally agree with that. But every legislator I've ever served with, that is something they feel. They like Project Independence, they support Project Independence. And that is the one area of the budget that always bothers them at the end, that we haven't been able to do all we want to do. So it's a very legitimate question, and it brings up it reminds me we've got to continually do more to make sure that senior can have dignity and respect in their own homes.
Very good, thank you. Please give us a 2-minute overview of what you did in past legislative sessions to enhance services for seniors and people with disabilities.
You said last legislative sessions or session?
Sessions.
Oh, well, the whole area of senior abuse. The child abuse thing is always in the forefront. But the senior abuse thing is something that we've had to deal with. That there is senior abuse out there. Often it's done in ways that really is tragic by friends and family. So we've worked hard, I think, to pass bills in the session. I've been very much in the forefront of that. Project Independence, I've already talked about that. This bus thing I worked hard on, I cannot emphasize that enough. The Salem bus system is inadequate. And it's inadequate in many ways. And one of the ways it's inadequate, because seniors have called in, they're by themselves, they can't get to a doctor's appointment, they can't get to church, they can't get to a little shopping mall right down the street. And if we had a more dynamic bus system, so we've changed the structure, and hopefully by changing the structure and the way to fund it, we will boldly allow ourselves to have a much more dynamic bus system in Salem, Kaiser, and therefore seniors, they won't have to live in fear of not being able to get around, which I've learned is one of the great fears. So whether it's how they live in their homes, you know, whether it's how they're treated, the abuse, or whether it's how they get around. Get around. I think I've worked very, very hard with specific legislation, budgets, as well as an attitude. It's not just because I'm a senior. I was raised by my grandmother because my mother had Parkinson's disease, and I miss her terribly. I always was reminded by her how great she was as a human being. She'd already raised her own family, and she came back to help myself and my brothers be raised. So it's a reminder of how precious she was in my life, but how important seniors are to our society.
Thank you. What will you do on a state level so that seniors and people with disabilities no longer face a lack of accessible and affordable housing?
This is a big one. You got into housing because housing's a crisis. I'm working with the Salem Y to build 40 units of available housing. We've talked about veterans, but you know what I'm saying, downtown housing would really be great if you can have some senior housing down there so they can walk, get around now because transportation can be an issue. We have to remind ourselves every day now we don't have affordable and accessible housing. And part of that is its location, and part of it's being able to get into it and out of it easily, and part of it is also being able to afford it, because many seniors live on a very limited income. So we've got to remind ourselves, we talk about housing, it's not just for the young people who are struggling, or veterans, some of the veterans that are, you know, wounded and hurting. We got the seniors to think about too. So it's, every session we are talking more and more about housing, and seniors have to be a part of that discussion.
Thank you. How would you prioritize state funding, including funding that is matched with federal funds, for services to an increasing senior and people with disabilities population?
The word prioritization always bothers me because I always think if you prioritize one, you have to take away from another. And I also think if you're really a great civilization, you find a way to take care of, you know, I've often said you judge a society about how it treats its very young and its elderly. And I really believe, I think that defines a civilization more than anything else. So I prioritize the young people, the children, and I prioritize seniors. Now, that isn't exclusive because you got people that aren't in either category, but they're suffering from day to day. They struggle from day to day. So I think you just have to have an attitude. If we're going to call ourselves a great civilization, a great society, we better be taking care of the children, and we better be taking care of our seniors and those that are less fortunate, struggle every day to get by.
Thank you. This is Senate President Peter Courtney, who is the incumbent Democrat candidate for Senate District 11. Thank you.